The 2023 Mexico City Grand Prix had a lot of action and a lot to talk about. We're going to do all of that in here and more. Welcome to my race recap. With only 4 rounds left in the F1 season, Formula One headed to Mexico City in the altitudes that give the teams a lot of trouble when it comes to cooling, and it provides an opportunity to see something a little bit different on the calendar as we wind down this 2023 season. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at our race quick hits, our weekend winners and losers, and then we're going to also go over the predictions that I made before the weekend began with my predictions results. But let's go ahead and jump on into our quick hits. But first, if you are an F1 fan, go ahead, hit that subscribe button down below. We do a lot of F1 content and a lot of sim racing content as well, if you're a fan of that as well. I do predictions videos before the race weekend, and then also obviously a recap once it's over. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss a single upload. And yeah, go ahead, leave a comment down below now what you thought of the Mexico City Grand Prix out of 10. Let me know what you thought was good, what could have been better. And let's go ahead, let's jump on into this and get things started with our race recap. Getting things started with our race quick hits. Let's go ahead and get it out of the way early. The biggest talking point coming from the race on Sunday, Sergio Perez, the only Mexican driver on the grid in his home race. My guy, what are we doing? If you didn't see what happened, somehow Sergio Perez got a great launch at the beginning of the race, leading down to turn 1, eventually going 3 wide with Max Verstappen on the far right, Charles Leclerc in the middle, and Sergio trying to go the long way around the outside of turn 1, trying to take the lead. What ended up happening is they got down to turn 1, and Checo decided, I just turn now, and turned into Charles Leclerc. Charles obviously had nowhere to go, obviously with Max on his right and him also about to turn into turn 1. Checo's car ends up being launched a good 8 to 10 feet in the air. It's very similar to Hamilton and Alonso's incident at Spa last season, where he ended up on one wheel before crashing back down, absolutely sustaining far too much damage to keep going. He made it back to the pits, but the damage was done and he was out in turn 1 in his home race. It really is just the old saying is obviously that you can win the race in the first corner. But actually that saying is that you can't win the race going in the first corner. This race had 71 laps where we saw the Red Bull was particularly extremely strong coming out of that final corner, going down the long main straight, where Max was able to overtake many people over the course of the race. And Checo had that opportunity as well, but unfortunately, a turn 1, lap 1 incident knocks him out, and to the absolute displeasure of all of the fans. I think I saw a report that many fans actually just left after the conclusion of lap 1 when it was obvious Checo wasn't coming back. And yeah, it's a very tough day for more ways than one for Checo, but when you are in the Red Bull and you get a little too anxious, you go 3 wide and turn in like Charles has somewhere to go when he obviously does not. That's a tough look. We'll go over the other reasons further down the list because they involve other drivers and we're going to cover it for them. But a weekend that a lot of people had high hopes for Checo, me included, it's a tough look for sure. Let's move on now. Ferrari qualifying 1-2 out of nowhere. I'm sure all of you, like me, were extremely shocked when Ferrari, coming into Q3, just absolutely lays down a banging couple of laps to finish up a provisional 1-2 for Ferrari, and which ended up being a qualified 1-2 for Ferrari. I think all of us were fully expecting Max to come through and take pole in the end, but Ferrari out of nowhere decides they just want to put in the laps of the weekend for qualifying and put it on front row lockout for Ferrari. Granted, you don't necessarily want to be starting on the front row in Mexico with the long straight down towards turn 1. It's a slipstream dream for everyone behind, but out of nowhere, Ferrari just came in and dominated qualifying at the end. As well, once you get to the race as well, they actually didn't do a Ferrari strategy masterclass, trademark. They actually did very well, all things considered, and the cars just kind of lost pace down the stretch. And obviously, it's another Charles Leclerc pole, not converted to a win, but it was a Charles Leclerc pole to a podium, which I think, all things considered, is pretty good. Honestly, it turned out pretty good for Ferrari in a weekend where the tire deck seemed to be extremely high, in a car that they drive that eats tires for breakfast. It honestly can't really be too mad about Ferrari this weekend. They did very well, actually. Moving on from there, we have Lewis Hamilton coaxing medium tires, used mediums, 37 laps, and then banging in a fastest lap on the final lap of the race. What absolute GOAT stuff was that? Lewis started outside of the top 5 in this one, ended up coming home in P2 in a very comfortable P2 after a red flag stopped the session. They opted to go to a used medium for the final 37 laps of the race. And I know there was a lot of other drivers who were managing to do that as well, but it really felt like quite a stretch to do mediums for 37 laps and have some pace in it. But Lewis absolutely proved all of us wrong, absolutely throwing it down, getting by Charles Leclerc up into P2, and he held it and pulled a gap to Charles there down the stretch. So a fantastic weekend from Lewis. Absolutely just GOAT stuff. Lando Norris, P17 to P5. Lando, obviously, big mistake in qualifying. Actually ends up being knocked out. I believe he was P19 before some penalties, and Lance Stroll decided to start from the pit lane. So he moves up to P17 at the starting grid and ends P5, chasing down many drivers there in the death of the last 15 or so laps. A very, very good drive from Lando, but all that does is really make us question is, what would have happened had he actually done qualifying to the level we expect from him? So time will tell, but Lando is driving unbelievably well right now, and it was quite the performance on Sunday. Speaking of extraordinary efforts, huge shout out to Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo beat Checo in qualifying to start P4 in an AlphaTauri, which this is one of the other big things I was mentioning when I was talking about Checo, is my guy. If you're a home race in a championship winning car, you are out qualified by the guy that they're trying to replace you with in your seat in a car that's significantly worse than yours. That was tough scenes, and the internet went alight as soon as Q3 ended, and Daniel Ricciardo out qualified Sergio Perez in an AlphaTauri. Absolute scenes, and I really don't know what to say about that, other than just absolutely bang and drive Daniel on the pace all weekend. He starts P4 in the race and he ends up P7, absolutely vaulting AlphaTauri up from P10 to P8 in the constructors title. Unfortunately, knocking Haas down to P10, but we don't have to talk about that yet. Alex Albon points. Absolutely, again, Alex Albon has just had this propensity recently to just put in these kinds of performances where he'll pull out a couple of points out of nowhere, and it'll be one of the best drives we've seen from him in a very long time. He is absolutely smashing it out of the park, and honestly, what more can we really say about the performance Alex has put in that Williams this year? His teammate Logan Sargent also mega drive. Let's not forget that Logan had a P19 to P12 before a fuel pump issue forced him to retire on the last corner of the last lap. Very unfortunate, but Logan showed a lot of really good pace, good overtaking, and a lot of good management to get there to the end in P12. But even though he finished P16 technically on paper in a DNF, we all know in our heart of hearts he finished P12 just a few positions behind Albon and only a few seconds down the road. An absolutely banging result for Logan, who hopefully is kind of gaining a little bit of confidence in the car. And you can see that he's able to start putting in these performances on the regular. Now, if only he could improve his qualifying pace, we could be seeing some very special stuff from him as well. So Logan, keep it up. Absolutely. Let's talk about Haas for a little bit. We don't have to go too long. Obviously, the big story with Haas, Kevin Magnussen suffers a rear left suspension failure that actually put him in a very scary spin going through the S's section in there in the second sector of the Autodromo. He ends up spinning. He goes to turn into a right-hander, rear suspension failure. Which then spins to the left into the wall. That must have been extremely scary, and I'm very happy to say that he it's reported that he's been okay, but you can see that he was very visibly shaken up getting out of the car, and that car took a beating going into the wall. So thankfully it was just a one-off, and Hülkenberg didn't have to suffer a similar fate, but thankfully Kevin is okay, and hopefully he'll be able to bounce back with such a quick turnaround to Brazil. Speaking of Hulkenberg, can we talk about how absolutely hilarious it was to see Hulkenberg holding off the Alpines for however many laps, almost 20 full laps, trying to hang on to P10. Unfortunately, 37 laps on mediums for this Haas car is just a little too late and a little too much to ask. So, well, it definitely did seem that we had some pace in the straights and enough in the corners to kind of hold Esteban at bay. Ultimately, he ends up sliding down to P13, which honestly is still a very solid result. And I'm definitely not too sad about it. It was a very, very good result considering what that car has looked like recently. And that sometimes you just got to take the little wins. Then we'll finish up by simply just saying that Aston Martin washed again. Absolutely washed. I believe both of them DNF'd. Lance Stroll ended up deciding to start from the pit lane, changing some floor components and setup components, trying to continue to utilize these races as practice sessions. So he ends up DNFing there towards the end, and Alonso also DNF, presumably to save component wear. Aston absolutely washed. And then other than that, I think we'll go ahead and move on from there to our weekend winners and losers. All right, let's go ahead and move right along to our weekend winners and losers. And we'll go ahead and we'll start things off with my weekend winner. And I think this one is very obvious. Daniel Ricciardo, the absolute legend, steps back into an AlphaTauri last weekend at Circuit of the Americas and has an okay weekend, probably suboptimal, to immediately turn that back right around 1 week later, be rapid in practice sessions, be rapid in qualifying, and a very respectable race result. Absolutely. Daniel, we know that you have a contract with AlphaTauri in 2024, but we also all know that that contract is a little bit fuzzy when it comes to a certain sister team to his own team. So Daniel doing absolutely everything he has to do to potentially put himself in contention for that seat going into next year. And man, talk about a 180 swing from the trajectory that a lot of us had hopes for to what happened. Checo qualifies behind Daniel in a Red Bull versus an AlphaTauri, and then crashes out in turn 1, lap 1, and Daniel finishes P7 for his first point score of the year. Absolutely fantastic stuff, Daniel. Keep it up. That was really exciting to see. And then for my weekend loser, I don't think this goes very far to saying that we are not even going to go that far from the conversation. It has to be Sergio Perez. I mean, we talked about it a lot in Race Quick Hits, so we're not going to belabor it too much here, but you caused your own lap 1 DNF at your home race. Do I really need to say any more? I know you got to be feeling the pressure of, you mentioned it, I think he mentioned it. Obviously, Checo, you're watching. We know that you're going for the win, but you can't win the race in turn 1. You got to be a little more patient than that. We know you were excited to get. We know you were excited to get towards the lead, and you saw an opportunity and you went for it, but it was not there. The window closed just as quickly, and just like that, the one guy everyone wants your seat to be occupied by and beat you in the race, beat you in qualifying, and you caused your own DNF in turn 1, lap 1. I'm sorry, Sergio, but it's pretty obvious that you're my weekend loser. Okay, let's go ahead and get this thing wrapped up with our last segment, predictions results. I went for my biggest positive surprise of Sergio Perez. No, for all of the same reasons that we just talked about, so we're not going to belabor it here. Definitely not. Probably the other way around, if I'm being honest. Biggest disappointment? I've given myself a 0.5 out of 1 on this one because I chose Lando Norris. And I was absolutely chefing in qualifying, by the way, where Lando being knocked out in Q1 with a P19 result. But obviously he makes a miraculous recovery in the race to finish P5. So I'm giving myself half a point here because he was absolutely washed in qualifying, but then recovered in the race. So half point. Moving on to qualifying results. And here's where my biggest L of the weekend came, where I chose a Max Verstappen pole, a Lewis Hamilton P2, and a Sergio Perez P3. Obviously, Max ended up starting P3 in this one, thanks to the surprise Ferrari 1-2. Lewis Hamilton did not qualify in the top 3, and Sergio Perez was out-qualified by Daniel Ricciardo in an AlphaTauri. So half a point out of 3 because Max did qualify in the top 3, but just in the wrong spot. So tough scenes. For race results, this is the one where I absolutely cooked. Or I predicted a Max Verstappen win. Check. A Lewis Hamilton P2. Check. And a Sergio Perez P3. Not. Obviously not. With Charles Leclerc taking that spot. But 2 out of 3 is not too shabby, if I do say so myself. So, coming all down to it, with my Haas prediction of the race weekend, and let me hit you with the fire that is my predictions of 1 car into Q2. Thank you, Nico Hülkenberg. And a top 14 finish. Thank you, Nico Hülkenberg. A top 14 finish was achieved with him finishing P13. And so that is 2 for 2. A perfect result on the weekend for my Haas predictions. Unfortunately, the predictions were washed. But I'm going to take it anyway, so because I got 2 for 2 is my Haas prediction. So if you do all the math, add it all up, spit it out the other side, I win 5 out of 10 for my predictions results, which honestly, compared to last weekend, much, much better. And I'll take a 50% at this point if I'm being honest. But there it is. How did your predictions turn out? Let me know down in the comment section below. And let's go ahead and let's wrap this thing up. Guys, that wraps things up for the Mexico City Grand Prix here in 2023. What about you? What did you think of the Mexico City Grand Prix? Let me know down in the comments below. Along with, did your predictions come true? And how are you looking forward to the next couple of rounds as we very soon and very quickly coming up to the end of this season? I know that both championships are already wrapped up, but I'm still really excited to see what the on-track action each time out. But we'll be back here again in a few days for our Brazil sprint race. I know, sprint race weekend predictions here in a few days. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, go ahead, hit that subscribe button down below. We'll be back here in a few days. And I hope you appreciate the last few races we have here. I think some of them are going to be bangers. Brazil always delivers. We'll see if it continues to live up as a sprint race. But until then, I'll see you in a few days for your predictions and my predictions. And until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.